Hey you guys, it's Friday again, time for another movie retrospective. And again, we're doing another horror classic from the 1980s.
Yeah.
The Evil Dead.
Yeah, this is a good one. It's up there with, the Reanimator series and Phantasm. The whole series of that.
And Evil Dead is really one of those few, and I think we mentioned this maybe on maybe our Phantasm show, that I think Evil Dead is the only horror franchise that either got better or was just as good. Like all of the, attendant sequels and all of the things that, were made outside of, in other mediums, were just as good. And I think Evil Dead is like a really prime example of that.
Yeah.
Some people would even argue that Evil Dead 2 was better than Evil Dead 1. I'm not sure about that. They're kind of different movies. The second one's kind of a remake of the first, but...
Now, my friend from Mexico, Jair, he's watching Reanimator for the first time, the entire series.
Yeah.
And he says it's getting better as it goes along, too.
Yeah.
And it's the first time he's ever seen it.
Yeah, okay.
And he's like our age.
So he has like a different perspective on it.
Yeah, I would say that Reanimator series, the Evil Dead series, and the Phantasm series are pretty unique in that they got better as they went.
Yeah.
And I'd put those all about neck and neck.
And the interesting thing about the Evil Dead series, too, is that it's such a simple premise. Like we said about Phantasm, it's like the reason that worked is because the mythology was so strange and it was kind of wide-ranging. There was a lot you could do with it.
Yeah, very unique.
Right, but like on the other hand, the Evil Dead franchise is basically like a demon zombie type thing, and it's pretty simple. Yeah. But they still did like some interesting things and went in interesting directions with it. Obviously Army of Darkness, which was the third one. I didn't see the remake, I'll admit. I don't know if it was as good as the original. And I also love the TV show that's on Starz, Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is actually one of the most wonderful TV shows ever. And you get to see Bruce Campbell's face stuck in a corpse's asshole. Yeah, and that's worth the entire price of admission. That was like the funniest thing I've ever seen.
I always saw the Evil Dead as almost kind of like an action version of The Exorcist. Imagine if The Exorcist
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, imagine if The Exorcist was an action movie.
Was it an action movie?
And then it was funny as hell. You know what I mean? So there was kind of like some slapstick horror in it.
Yeah.
Mixed with zombies. Imagine, if there isn't a living body to inhabit, the demons will inhabit, or they'll possess a dead body.
Yeah.
And make kind of like a zombie. But it would also inhabit trees and possess trees.
Because why not?
Possessed books. The Necronomicon's in it.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in it, which is a little nod to Lovecraft. So it's almost kind of like, you could say it might be a Lovecraft spinoff.
It is kind of, and the original title of it was Book of the Dead, and it was supposed to be like a Lovecraftian type of invocation thing when they were first thinking about it. I think what makes the Evil Dead work, and why even a lot of people still love it today, and it's like really one of the best, well-regarded movies of the 80s, not just of the 80s, but in horror movies in general. I think its best quality is its exuberance. Yeah. You can tell that they were very young, they loved this shit. And it's just like, even though the filming of it was famously not very pleasant for everyone involved because it was just this horrible ordeal, but you could tell that it was like a labor of love. They were having a shit ton of fun. This was Sam Raimi's first feature-length movie, and he is obviously a very innovative filmmaker, and you can see that very clearly. Just even in this cheap jack movie that they made for like $350,000 maybe. Yeah. I think it was just like some piddling amount. So, but I'm really fascinated by like the history, like the production history of this movie, because like I said, this was Sam Raimi's first, but he'd only made short films prior to this. Him and Bruce Campbell actually grew up together. They were kids together, and they'd made like little, Super 8 movies and shit like that. They actually started out doing comedy. But they kind of said, well, let's do a horror movie. But the first thing we'll do, they had the idea sort of the Evil Dead, but they actually made it a short film first called Within the Woods. And it had a similar premise. And they said, we'll make this short movie and then we'll show it to investors to get money to like expand it to full length. And that actually did end up working out. They didn't get as much money as they wanted, but they were able to like borrow money from friends and family and various investors and stuff. And they got like kind of enough money to cobble something together. So they all go out to Tennessee to the infamous cabin. They were actually staying in that cabin while they were filming it. It didn't have any plumbing. and shit like that. So they're like, so it was like close quarters. They had like one guy on the crew that was like a carpenter, and he was like doing all the art direction. That was pretty much what you see in the cabin in the movie is just pretty much the way it was. They didn't really have any money to like set dress it or anything like that. So that's pretty much kind of what it looked like. And when the movie was finished and it came out, like Sam Raimi was taking it around and showing it to like everybody he knew. And he happened to come across this guy named Irvin Shapiro. And Irvin Shapiro was the guy who had distributed Night of the Living Dead, you know, the very famous George Romero movie. And he said, oh, I think you've kind of got something here. So he said that he would distribute it. Irvin Shapiro also happened to be one of the founders of the very famous Cannes Film Festival in France. So he said, well, I'll give you a showing at the Cannes Film Festival. So at that showing was none other than Stephen King. And Stephen King saw The Evil Dead and loved that shit.
Yeah.
So him like raving about it and bringing up and just talking about this is like this amazing movie, and it's like this new talent is like kind of coming out of nowhere. And so him pushing it like really kind of got a distribution deal. And it actually ended up, when it first came out, what they did, they kind of like released it. They took like Bruce Campbell's the theater in Detroit that he had grown up going to, and they did like a whole William Castle like premiere there. They had like ambulances parked outside, like in case anybody had a heart attack or anything. They had like all the gimmicky kind of shit.
I didn't know he was from Detroit.
They're all from Michigan, yeah.
Okay, it's all starting to make sense now. Because remember when I told you the first time I saw this was in Trenton, Michigan?
Yeah.
And it was in a drive-in theater.
Yeah.
And I could have swore that they were playing part 1 and part 2 back to back, and everybody was there. Well, that's, you know, that would have been their territory.
Yeah.
So maybe that's so. And I think it was after Evil Dead 2 had come out.
Yeah, they might have just showed like a double feature.
Yeah, when what year did Evil Dead 2 come out?
87, I think.
Okay, yeah,
I think it was
the dates are all making sense. Then
yeah.
That's about the time.
And then Army of Darkness came out in 93, right. I think.
Yeah, that was a wild night when we saw that, man. I mean, everybody I knew was there in that theater, in that drive-in.
Yeah.
And people, these young people, they don't know what the drive-in was all about.
I would have honestly loved to have seen it at a drive-in.
Man, the drive-in was a cross between Woodstock and a cheap motel. Well, and all your friends were there. You'd look in the very, very back row with all the cars in the very, very back. You'd see what your friend's car back there, and he'd be back in there, and the car would be bouncing. And you knew what was going on. Because sometimes they would get serious. You had to throw it in reverse and go to the back. Go to the back. You know what I'm talking about?
All right, excuse us, you guys.
Yeah, and this was in the 80s now. You know, it was a different time. Sometimes there were 4 people in those cars.
Well, you know.
Yeah, double dates sometimes meant giving high fives across the seat, you know, and into the front seat. What's up, man? You know, it was another time.
I actually did see this. I was too young to see it when it first came out in the theater, but I actually saw it when they re-released it. Whenever they did the theater re-release, I actually did see it then, and I hadn't seen it for many years, so that was like a lot of fun. But the cool thing, like I said, the cool thing about this movie, yes, it's very cheaply made. Yeah, like some of the acting's not, I mean, other than Bruce Campbell, who obviously is amazing. You know, some of the acting is kind of, you know, whatever. But the thing about it that I love, like I said, is just how it's like just this joyful, crazy, let's just make the most ridiculous, over the top, just all this over the top gore. Yeah. All this just gets sillier and sillier. And it's like I said, the camera work is really innovative. And it's funny because they did that for like nothing. Like Sam Raimi, he didn't have enough money to rent a camera dolly or anything like that. So he would would mount the camera like on a plank of wood, and like two guys would like run around bouncing it. It's like he mounted it on a bike at one point.
Yeah, and the first one, you know, Evil Dead 1, it looks kind of rough, the makeup.
It does.
I mean, it's obviously a bunch of, you know, blue makeup on people with, you know, but it didn't matter. In those days when we saw these, it was over the top. They were kind of zany, but they still scared us. And that's something that I think a lot of maybe people don't understand today. You know, people are very hardened to imagery. Yeah. Young kids can see some wild shit, and it doesn't really bother them. They know it's fake. Yeah. The imagery doesn't affect them. That would still scare the shit out of us, though. We'd laugh, and it would scare us at the same time.
That was one of the best things about this movie too,
Yeah.
is that it was, yes, it's very funny, it's very over the top and ridiculous, but yeah, it was like really kind of creepy too.
In those days, yeah.
Like and I think a lot of it was due to, again, like a lot of Sam Raimi's camera work. Like he did like these strange close-ups, like these strange Dutch angles, like the whole, I love that one, this movie doesn't fuck around. It's like there's maybe a couple minutes of like all the people going to the cabin, hey, we're going to the cabin, blah blah blah, and then they find it. Then like literally 2 minutes later, you know, the girl Cheryl is like drawing the clock and the clock stops, and then there's like this creepy kind of shit, and then immediately like demons,
the sound and everything,
rapey
and just
trees, everything.
And it was also, the times was weird, you know, like in those days you weren't really supposed to be watching these were almost kind of like almost kind of like a little taboo underground movies. It was almost kind of like watching some kind of snuff flick or something. They weren't mainstream, they were kind of underground.
Yeah.
So you always had a feeling when you were watching these that you were watching something you really weren't supposed to be seeing.
Yeah.
That you weren't supposed to be watching these.
There was like
they were
some
subversive.
There was some kind of like grimy kind of thing about them.
Yeah.
Like you're like
normal society, the people that were older than us did not approve of these. We were growing up with them as teenagers. We were like, oh man, it was fucking badass. But adults were saying, no, we wouldn't have liked these. They're like, oh, that shit's terrible.
All that comic
crap.
that's
terrible. Yeah.
Like the guy in
They were sticking to mud, so, you know, it was kind of like punk rock. In many ways.
That's a good analogy, actually. That's exactly what it was like. And I mean, it's funny now because it seems like horror and punk and stuff like that is so mainstreamed. But when we were growing up, it was like, that was like a big thing. And like I said, you know, home video had just come into the fore, and like, so they had like all these cheap like horror movies, and you could just go rent them. And, you know, there was really something about the atmosphere of watching these videos, like you said, that looked like just somebody made it in their backyard. They were very, or something like that.
And they were like culturally subversive.
Yeah.
The mainstream culture was not really smiling on these movies and people going to see them, especially young people. This was something that they would have liked to have stopped, actually, I believe.
Yeah, there was a lot
It's just
that
it was going on anyway. And like I said, you know, where I was in those days, you know, we had drive-ins still, you know, which they were dinosaurs when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And the shit that was going on in drive-ins was pretty off the wall.
Yeah.
And it was all high school kids.
Well, we
were feral back then. They weren't like these kids. We were like feral kids, man.
You would just disappear for hours at a time. Your parents had no idea where you were.
You never knew.
You're just running around
what
was
going on,
setting shit on fire.
Who was with who, or who was smoking what, or drinking what, and who was dating what.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about the Evil Dead, though, and this actually didn't happen with a lot of horror movies. I mean, I feel like in the 70s, horror got a little more legitimate because there were some kind of high profile, like big budget horror films, you know, like The Omen and, you know, The Shining a little bit later, that were made by, you know, established filmmakers, and they had big budgets and they were actually like critically acclaimed and stuff. But a lot of these kind of really cheap indie horror movies, I feel like a lot of critics were just like, meh, whatever. They were just garbage. But the interesting thing about the first Evil Dead is that even when it came out in 1981, it was pretty much universally loved. I mean, all the critics were like, this is fucking great. It's just like, it's so fun. It's like, you know, all, like I said, all the innovative camera work and just all the exuberance of it. So it's interesting because it was recognized. I mean, shit, I think even the Los Angeles Times said back in 1981, they called it an instant classic. So I think people did recognize at the time, which didn't always happen with these types of movies. And it seems like its reputation just kind of grew and grew over the years.
Only the cool people liked it, though. You know what I mean? It wasn't, you know. And another thing is I'm literally, it was punk rock on screen. Yeah. And it had a big influence in the goth and industrial scene. I mean, there's a really famous goth industrial band called Skinny Puppy, and it robbed so many audio samples of dialogues from all the Evil Dead movies, and you'll hear dialogue from the movies and sound effects from the movies in Skinny Puppy songs. Yeah, and very effective because the movies weren't that old when those albums were coming out, and I'd hear them, and you'd hear those demon sounds going, and you go, oh, I know what that is. Oh shit, and it would creep you out. Some of those Skinny Puppy albums, you know, you didn't really want to listen to those with the lights off when you were a kid, you know. Well, I'm saying a kid, you know, late teens, early 20s. Some of that stuff sounded like it was going to summon demons. Yeah, it was like,
well, it did in the movie.
It was kind of like those albums were kind of like haunted house music being played backwards with a bunch of demonic voices happening with drum machines going backwards and stuff, and it's weird.
I mean, you never know what you're going to invoke when you get involved in that type of thing.
Might invoke that damn tree demon that come out and rape you. Remember that one?
That is simultaneously one of the... It's like you're watching the scene, and I can imagine like the first time everybody saw this, because I don't think I ever saw that in another movie ever before or since. And it's kind of just like you're watching, and you're just like, no, that's not what's gonna happen. That's how it's gonna happen. And then
where tentacle porn came from.
Oh my god, it is. They're going there, and they did go there. I mean, pretty much.
Put that wood on her.
I know, right? That's probably exactly what Sam Raimi was thinking. He's like, wood? What? Oh, that's pretty funny. Yeah, tree rape. You don't get that in every movie, I'm just saying.
The only thing another thing that I remembered about these movies is that I have a hard time remembering the difference between Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2.
They're similar, the plot construction.
I remember that 2 looked a lot better, but there were times where I'm thinking, well, when's this going to happen? And I was like, oh yeah, that was part 1. Or, oh, that was part 2, and then that happens. They seem, because they're happening in the same location, and a lot of times I got them confused.
Yeah, like I said, they're very similar. It almost seems like the second one's kind of a remake of the first one, just with like a higher budget.
Yeah, it's like the first one remade with a better budget.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's like when Evil Dead was released, like I said, it kind of got like a soft release. He kind of toured it, and then they released it in theaters and on VHS kind of at the same time. In the theaters, it ended up making well over $2 million, which not too bad because it cost less than $500,000 to make. So it made its budget back and then some. Interestingly, it did much, much better in Europe. They fucking loved that shit over there. And in fact, in the UK, that was the year it came out on VHS. It was easily the highest. You know, it sold the most copies of any other VHS.
It's weird that I never saw it on VHS back in the day. Never. I first saw them both the same day in that damn drive-in.
In the drive-in?
Yeah, and Evil Dead 1 already had a killer reputation, so I knew I was in store for some shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when I saw it, I remember it blowing me away. But there was other stuff going on, too. And like I was saying, a drive-in was a damn party.
Yeah.
So, you know, but
you're only half paying attention to them.
Kinda. Shit was happening. You know.
The only horror movie I remember seeing in the theater, I think I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, the one with Dennis Hopper. I'm pretty sure I saw that in the drive-in. But at that stage, I mean, I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, and we had one drive-in theater left, and it was like pretty much on its last legs by that point. So it was just kind of like they were begging people to come in there. But I think that was like, no, I take that back. I saw Scanners in the drive-in also. I remember that. I don't think I saw this in the drive-in. I did see it on VHS a few times, and I might have seen it on cable. And then, like I said, when they did the re-release of it in the theaters, I went and saw it again then. But it's just, like I said, its reputation has just grown over the years. They made so many. Holy shit, man. It's like not only have they made the 3 movies, they made the TV show. They did a remake in 2013. There's a fucking Evil Dead the musical. There's a series of comics where Ash fights Freddy and Jason. There's one where Ash fights zombie versions of a bunch of Marvel characters. There's like, so it's just like this whole ridiculous. And this obviously was where Bruce Campbell's, you know, cult icon status came from this particular movie. And it's funny because when we were watching the first Evil Dead, which is actually on Shudder at the moment, I had forgotten how fucking young he was because we've been watching Ash versus Evil Dead, you know, when he's obviously much older now. Even though, like I said, if you haven't seen that show, you should watch it because it's fucking awesome. It's fucking awesome. Yeah. But he was like, I mean, he was just a kid in this movie. He was like 19 or 20 or some shit like that. It's like amazing. Yeah. But this just kind of just goes to show, like I said, it's kind of like George Romero's zombie movies. It's kind of like if you have a bunch of friends and you really, really, really want to make a movie and can beg people to make money and you really want to do it, and these people did it. And now Sam Raimi is making fucking Spider-Man movies. Yeah. And shit like that. It's like, look how that happens. I know it's probably rare, like a lot there's nowadays since the fucking...
I'm not sure if anything like this could happen to nowadays. I don't think it happens this way anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't because, I mean...
Too much competition right now.
The whole, the whole kind of format of everything has changed because now the means of production are so cheap that pretty much anybody... I mean, you can make a movie with your fucking phone if you really wanted to. So it's not like it was back in the day where you just kind of had to like innovate because you couldn't really afford the equipment and all this other kind of stuff. And then you had to like... beg people to like watch your movie.
It took $500,000 to make a movie that nowadays, like you said, you can make on your phone, and if you had your friends helping you, you could probably make it for a couple $1,000s now.
Yeah, you could. Yeah,
if people were chipping in and working for free, it'd be a couple $1,000.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably essentially the first iteration of Evil Dead. You could do
Evil Dead 1 for that.
Probably. Yeah, I mean the first iteration of Evil Dead they made, which was Within the Woods, which is a short film, they made that for about $1,600.
Really? Was that little?
Yeah, but I don't. It was short. I don't know how long it was, but so like I said, the budget for the first Evil Dead, I've seen it everywhere from $100,000 to $350,000. It did make like 8 times its money back, in its initial theater run, and like I said, it was very
8 to 1 investment.
Yeah, so it was a very, very, very well reviewed movie, and like I said, its reputation has just grown over the years. Yeah. And if you're into horror and you haven't seen it, then you can't be that into horror because everybody's seen this fucking movie.
Yeah, that's kind of like saying, being a Christian, you haven't read Genesis.
Yeah, it is kind of like that.
Yeah, I never read Genesis.
It is kind of like
there was a flood. Yeah, Evil Dead. What? What's Evil Dead?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like anybody that's into horror, if you must have seen this movie. It's one of the formative movies of the horror genre, particularly in the '80s, but of the genre as a whole.
So much of the genre today is actually influenced from those early movies. Phantasm 1, Evil Dead 1, Reanimator.
Yeah.
A lot of the modern kind of zany horror is from that. I see that over and over again.
Yeah, you kind of see it echoes of it in kind of more recent movies like Tucker and Dale versus Evil, stuff like that. It was just that kind of over the top, hilarious, like super super gory, but also super super funny. And I kind of feel like this is sort of now. I did want to mention too. We might do a separate show on this, but have you ever seen Sam Raimi's more recent film Drag Me to Hell?
No.
You would probably like that very much. Right. It's I haven't
seen it.
Yeah, it's actually really good. I enjoyed it. I remember seeing it at the theater, but it's not as quite as zany, but it still has that same kind of feeling to it.
What's funny is that we're calling it zany now, but I remember seeing it when it came out as a kid. It still scared us.
Like I said, it's zany and creepy in like equal measure.
It was like over the top, and you weren't sure really how you were supposed to react to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, that's fucked up. You know what I mean? And then something else would happen. You'd be like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. And that's it. And then the hand, he cuts his own hand off. You're like, whoa. It's just weird,
But yeah, seriously.
We weren't really sure how we were supposed to react to it because that kind of stuff was so new.
Yeah. I think, like I said, that was one of the best things about it.
But there was a lot of screaming and a lot of blood, so of course it scared you.
Because there had really not been anything like that. So it really kind of blew the doors off in terms of that type of thing. And like I said...
It wasn't a genre yet. Yeah. It wasn't a thing.
But like I said, the thing that I found the most fascinating is how popular it was even when it first came out. Because like I said, sometimes it takes time for movies to kind of be like, oh yeah, we revisited it and that was a good movie, and even though nobody liked it at the time, but this was like totally different. This one was like pretty much universally. I don't think there was any bad reviews.
Well, kind of like Phantasm 1 was a little bit before this, I believe, and I believe that Phantasm 1, as soon as it was made, everybody in my school, I remember talking about it like in late elementary school.
Yeah.
And we were all scared of that movie, and only a couple kids had seen it. And we were asking, well, what did it happen? Oh, the ball hit you in the head, and then a bunch of water, a bunch of blood would juice out like a juicer. You know what I mean? And we didn't know whether to believe the kids that saw it.
You're making that up.
Yeah, because we didn't have cable then.
Right.
And then that movie vanished. They never played that one on cable.
Yeah.
So me and my buddies, we always kind of thought that was kind of like a taboo movie. Something you weren't supposed to see.
Yeah.
I didn't see it until recently again.
That's funny. It's like, and I think that's something that's kind of lacking in a lot of new ones. Because like I said, people are so jaded now and we've seen everything. I mean, back in the day, it was like, you weren't really sure what you were going to see because it's just kind of like people were all over the place and they were just
you
like
weren't sure what the technology was, what it is they could actually show you.
There was like all these little scrappy independent directors and they were making all this stuff and you weren't really sure what they could do, and a lot of stuff hadn't been done yet. I do kind of feel like now most stuff has been done. You don't really see. I mean, I'm not saying there's good movies now too, but it's harder to do something original because a lot of stuff. So most of the time, it's just kind of you're just paying homage to something that's already been done.
I'm skeptical of movies now in a way. You know, they really have to do something to make something special now, because it's almost seems like it's a dying art form, like a dying medium. I think it might go the way of like epic poetry or something. You know, I think video games are really, you know, maybe virtual reality type stuff is probably the future, and then even that'll probably get old.
Well, everything
just gets old.
It's the great circle of life.
Yeah, eventually they'll just be plugging in directly to your brain, and they'll be giving you hallucinations, you know, directly into your brain, and that will be the movie.
And then it'll just be like WALL-E, where we're all just these big fat slugs like laying around on lounge chairs.
Yeah, nobody does anything.
You just float around on your lounge chair, and robots bring you sodas and shit.
It's not good, man. It's not good.
You haven't seen WALL-E, have you? Yeah, that's what happened to the human race in WALL-E. They all go.
That's what Frank Hubert warned about in Dune.
Yeah.
That's why they
Frank Herbert. Yeah.
That's why they banned computers and you had to have mentats and mental powers and shit.
Yeah, because they were afraid computers would make everybody lazy.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
They had to overthrow them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool. And then they wrote it into their holy books and shit. A new Dune is coming, people.
Yeah.
I hope it's the same dude who did the new Blade Runner. I hope it's good.
And I love the new Blade Runner. I really did. We did a review on that too.
I'm a big Dune fan.
Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I said, if you haven't seen Evil Dead, again, what's the matter with you? You really need to get on that right now. I feel like this is kind of cool because I'm glad we had Shudder, because they have a lot of really classic horror movies on there that we hadn't done. So we're getting around to
plugging Shudder again for free.
Well, hey.
Shudder, you owe us money.
They have a lot of good shit on there. Actually, we watched a movie on there last night that you really liked, and you know how picky he is.
Yeah, I'm very picky. It was called Chained, right?
Chained.
It was pretty good.
With Vincent D'Onofrio.
Dude that played Kingpin.
Kingpin on Daredevil, yeah. And he's like a serial killer. And that was a very, very compelling movie. He actually paid attention. He got off his tablet for 2 hours and paid attention to the movie.
That one disturbed me.
That's huge, you guys.
That one disturbed me.
It was very disturbing, I thought. But yeah, I liked the interaction between it. It was very good. The acting was very good. So, check it out. But yeah, so original Evil Dead is on Shudder too. A bunch of other ones. Yeah, it's Halloween's coming up. So, you might want to go check that out. But yeah, so I guess that will do it for our review of the classic 1981 Evil Dead.
Yeah.
So remember, if you like the show, to like, share, subscribe on all your social media. Go to our Patreon page or our blog. You know how it goes. If you watch the show, I just say the regular shit all the time. Also, remember that our regular episodes come out every Tuesday. Movie reviews every Friday. And also, we started the new thing where we're reviewing movies in the theater. And that comes out every Sunday. So there'll be a new one up on Sunday. So check that out too. And until next time, bye.